Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Sprint 192 review. This is a regular 2-week sprint, although we didn't do the review last Wednesday, so we're doing it today, August 1st. I'll start with the overview. Melody will be doing the UI today. Adam will follow up with the providers, then Joe on the platform, and I will be doing the API. First, an announcement to the community. ManageIQ NIDORF 1 has been released. Lots of great changes, including 4 new providers this time. You can read about it on the blog post with the link right there, and head over to the download page to grab it. On the statistics side, there were 122 merged PRs this sprint with 130 opened. And the breakdown is mostly bugs, but a fair number of enhancements. But we've done a lot of bug squashing this past sprint. And over to Melody with the UI.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. So in this sprint, 23 PRs got merged into UI Classic Repo, out of which 8 were bugs, 9 were enhancements, 1 was a refactoring bug, and there were 5 other PRs that fell into various categories. And I'll be explaining them in the following slides. Next slide. So in this one, the provider name was not displayed for archived VMs and instances, but the images were still being displayed, making the information incomplete. So this PR now checks that if the text is not present, then we will not render the image. Next slide. For this PR, there were issues across browsers where with the rendering of the provider charts, such as the labels were overlapping in Safari and legends were missing in Firefox. And after expanding the charts to full screen, the minimize button was not responding, but this issue still existed within Charbon charts. So now we have since fixed the styling issue on all browsers and made the charts look similar to the dashboard charts. Next slide. Here, the chargeback rates ID was not being properly passed. During copying the chargeback rate, David passed down the correct ID into its JavaScript redirect function to fix the issue. Here, special characters were printed inside the dialog options select row. Akil fixed this by adding string classes to identify certain patterns and print the correct text. Here, the configuration button was missing when we visited the volume mapping page from the provider dashboard. The Auto SDE team added the configuration buttons and the new volume mapping form. Here, a server error was displayed when the chargeback preview button was clicked. That button did not have a check to disable the button based on the availability of the data. This PR added the helper method to ensure that proper checks were made, and with those proper checks, we ensured that they can also handle the server error. Here for the dropdowns, the value of the default choose was set to string choose with the angular brackets enclosed instead of nil. This caused mismatched font colors and is inconsistent with the rest of the code base, and so it has since been fixed. The service catalog summary page was converted from XAML to React, and since this page had a particular button, some changes had to be made in MIQ structured list components, so those were done as well. Here, the report schedule summary page was also converted from XAML to React, and it was a simple conversion. There were no other complications. A similar conversion of the report info summary page was also done. Next slide. And the dashboard widget summary page was also converted from XAML to React. The Auto SDE team implemented a validate storage REST API on the Auto SDE side to have the ability to validate the storage system credentials before we send the creation task to the queue. With this feature, we're saving time and we can change the credentials if there are some invalid parameters without waiting for the response of a queued task. Jeffrey implemented the validate button on the attaching storage system page, and we can press the button and validate that before the provider parameters are valid and store it so that it doesn't ask a second time around. We have a few other PRs, including some externalized strings within the server that the translations team saw that weren't properly translating. Gilbert refactored the visual settings form to use simple value prop on the is searchable select field in order to simplify the on submit code. Keenan removed the remaining ad hoc references. There was a fix for a test failure in tags spec, and a few packages were upgraded like Moment, jQuery UI, and Common Components. And that's all from the UI side. Over to Adam.
Thanks, Melody. So for providers this sprint, we added an active scope to the cloud database flavor model, which allows us to more easily get a list of flavors which are not deprecated by the provider, which will come in handy later. Nasser added a cloud database server model. So for some providers, they also model the server that a cloud database is running on. And this is important when selecting target when you're creating a database. We were not collecting this in inventory, and so now we are. So there's a new table and model for cloud database servers, and providers which support this are pulling them into inventory as well. We simplified the inventory builder by using the persister instance directly. This is sort of some backend cleanup work to simplify how the internals of the refresh is working. Keenan refactored the host power state logic to move some of the VMware specifics out. So we moved those to the to the VMware repository. And so the core host power state methods look a lot cleaner now. For Amazon, we added a rake task that automatically updates the list of cloud database flavors. Similarly to the EC2 instance flavors, this is run by a scheduled GitHub actions to update this list once a week as it changes and automatically create a PR. Melody updated the cloud database create schema to fix a couple of issues. And we're also now only allowing the user to select cloud database flavors which are not deprecated. The next slide. AutoSDE this sprint, Tony capped off a long PR to add event catcher support for AutoSDE. So they have an API that allows them to expose events from the AutoSDE side. And so he added the event catcher worker and all of the surrounding changes required to be able to do this, including event switchboard changes to manage IQ content, and also changes to core, which allow us to link up the physical servers, the physical storages to the events that were raised. Keenan did some refactoring to convert authentication status to use supports feature mixin. As previously mentioned, Tony added the linking up of EMS events to physical storages. For Azure, Nasser added the changes to collect cloud database servers, which is going to be used for the next one, which is a dropdown in the dialog when you're creating a cloud database, which is done by Melody. For Cisco Intersight, we updated the Intersight client to use the version of the gem which uses autoload. The requiring this gem was taking a ridiculous amount of memory. And so by delay loading these, we were able to greatly reduce the memory usage. And so as of this PR, we're now using that more efficient gem version. Next slide. For IBM Cloud, Jay fixed an issue where the API error exception was causing a failure if it did raise an error. Basically, we were checking for the error message in the wrong place for that particular exception class. So he fixed that up, which is causing issues in provisioning. We also fixed some cloud database create update issues, as well as added translations there. I believe that was Melody that did that. For Power HMC, the HMC team added support for clone from a template to a VM. They had previously had support for VM to template, but I think probably most people would prefer to be able to clone from template to a VM, so they got that done. OpenStack, Gilbert fixed a bug where the provider ID select field was having issues with clearable. I'm not entirely sure what the problem was. There was some JavaScript there, and that's over my head. So he had some screenshots and looked like it worked. So that was great. Next slide. For Oracle Cloud, similar to Cisco Intersight, Jason had to fix to the OCI gem, which uses auto load to reduce memory usage of this. This is causing issues where once this was required, some of the workers on Spotify were going over their memory limits and getting killed. So nice to use a gem that's not going to cause us issues there. And for Redfish, Gilbert also similarly fixed issue for some of the searchable select fields. That's it for providers. Over to Jim.
Okay, so for enhancements, Adam added support for SSH operations with Rugged and embedded Ansible. Brandon upgraded the operator that we use to the latest operator SDK version. Keenan was noticing inconsistency with how we create database regions. So he eliminated the argument passing they were using, then we were passing to rig, and instead just use environment variables. Brandon moved the appliance dependencies we had in the core gem file to the core gem file to simplify how we were doing our lock files and finding dependencies. Jason added a tool for making some of the JSON logs more readable from Spotify, so we called it unJSON logs. Keenan found some shiny deletions in the form of no longer use break tasks and related logic, so he removed that. Adam added some logic to migrate and seed from the plugin's bin update, so it acted more like core and not have some of the side effects where you weren't expecting certain things to happen, such as we pulled latest updates and now bin update didn't actually migrate your database or seed it. So now that works just like core does. Jason extracted JSON logger from the container logger, as there was some container logic and specifics that were really unrelated to the logger format. Keenan continued his project of expanding the supports syntax as he was doing in prior sprints. I updated some of the translations in the master branch English PO and POT files for July 25th. And Brandon followed up some of the changes he was doing last sprint with avoiding installing weak dependencies by doing this globally through DNF. Next slide. Okay, so for bugs, Adam and I fixed some issues around the Rails 6051 upgrade as it changed the default behavior of YAML load to use safe load only. So we had to temporarily use YAML unsafe load. Melody and I fixed a few locations. We were using get text evaluated translations in instance variables that were cached or memoized. This was causing weird bugs where we would go to one screen and switch our locale, and when we come back, one of the strings wasn't translated. And it was because we were actually caching the originally translated value and not reevaluating it. So we found a few locations and fixed those. Then I added more memcache socket failure retries. Because we don't use multiple memcache instances, the default behavior for DALI was 2 retries, actually 1 retry, 2 total attempts. And that was just not enough if you don't have a pool of memcache instances to fail over to. So we had to be more careful about giving up so quickly. David fixed a typo in a translation file that actually caused the title bar in some of the UI screens to have the wrong value. So he fixed that, and we actually probably fixed other issues that we were not aware of that were also in that section of the file. Keenan found and removed a few more locations where we were still doing getting data for ad hoc provider metrics, which was previously removed. On to Jason for the API.
Okay, on the API side, bugs were fixed in deleting resources for the host initiator, physical storage, and volume mapping. Thanks to Servaza for that. And he also added configuration buttons for volume mappings to the API. And that's it on the API side. And that's it for our sprint review. Next sprint review is sprint 193. Will be on August 10th back at the normal time of 9:30 a.m. Eastern. And thanks to everyone in the community. Thanks to everyone, all the contributors for this last sprint. And we'll see you all next time. Have a great day.